Now, is there any truth to the notion that your birth order in your family determines your personality? Well, research suggests being the eldest, middle or baby can have a huge influence on who you are.
Here to tell us more is Michael Grose, author of Why Firstborns Rule the World and Lastborns Want to Change It. How are you, Michael?
Good, thanks, Tim. Good.
Now, everyone looks at the Brady Bunch and they look at the middle children and they say that they have a problem. Give us the story. Where's the best place to be born? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth?
Oh, you're talking to a youngest here, so I'm pretty biased. I think youngest is a fairly good position. And one of the things which come out about youngest ones is that we supposedly sit at the bottom of the family and we sort of look up and we don't make the same mistakes as our siblings do. So we're supposedly pretty good with people.
Well, speaking as the eldest, I just have to say the babies get it all their way. Mum and Dad, why aren't you so tough on him as you were on me? I think that the eldest get the rough end of the stick, really.
Well, actually, if you're looking at the eldest, firstborn is not such a bad position to be in. It's almost the king's position or the regal position. They tend to be smarter. In looking at IQ tests, achievement-wise, they're pretty much driven, and also education-wise, they often get a head start there. And we know that sort of money-wise, they usually are the highest earners. So there's a lot going for firstborns.
Well, what about some of the celebrities? We see Kylie and Danny and so many other celebrity siblings. What's the psychology behind this?
Usually the first and seconds are different. Now, you can both be in the same area. However, it's really hard if you're following a superstar. So often, even if you're in the same area, you might be slightly different. So I sometimes look at Steve and Mark Waugh, who are twins, but they played cricket, both really successful, but both completely different characters and show different characteristics as well.
What about middle children? I know, Tim, you're there somewhere in the middle, aren't you? Where are you, Tim?
I'm fourth and we're one of six, but all the teachers at school said my brother, who was just above me, were like, we got into trouble all the time, kicked out of class for doing all sorts of stuff, but my top two brothers, well, they didn't do a thing wrong.
Are middle children trouble, Michael?
They were squeaky clean.
Yeah, look, middle children are the victims of poor timing. They sort of don't get the perks and privileges of the firstborn, nor the easy run of the youngest ones. And what we do know about... Sorry?
You've got to fight hard.
You do have to fight hard. There's a fair bit to say that the youngest ones the ones in the middle are better adjusted than those around them. They don't have the same expectations of life. They'll often pursue goals which are really different than the one above them. And they're fairly independent as well because they've learned that they actually have to be.
What about parenting? Are there any things that you can do to help out the middle child or to take the pressure off the eldest child, or to, you know, what can parents do to head this off?
Yeah, good point. I think, you know, a one-off tip, if you've got a firstborn or your eldest one, is don't put too much pressure on them because they put enough pressure on themselves. So release that pressure. And if you go down to the youngest one, it's almost actually put pressure on them because they often get away with a lot and they're pretty manipulative and you know, sort of life's charmers in some ways. So put a little bit of pressure on them, make sure that they actually do some jobs to help out, and make sure that you actually... You know, let them... Sometimes they're the ones who don't do the talking because someone else will talk for them. And if you've got one in the middle, well, they're the ones that often don't spend a lot of one-on-one time with their parents. So you've got to be a little bit manipulative and make sure you spend some time just with them. So maybe if you're going down to the shops or somewhere, you sort of take them with you and spend a little bit of time with them.
Who grows up the quickest?
Who grows up the quickest? The firstborns are far more... They take life far more seriously. They're often the conservatives. They're a little bit more, and authority is quite important for them. So I'd actually say firstborns are the ones who actually grow up the quickest, and they're the ones in some ways who, I don't want to say, you've got to be careful here, but they're a little bit more neurotic. They're the perfectionists of the world, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves.
Now, what about the youngest? Their traits, they're creative and unconventional. I'm just reading some of the things he said, and Angelina Jolie seems to be a pretty typical youngest child.
Yeah, what happens with youngest ones is they're not as worried about pleasing their parents as firstborns. So one of the things about being a firstborn or an eldest is you're a approval-seeking missile. You know, you want to please your mum and dad. And by the time you get down to the youngest one, what actually happens is the bar's high with the firstborn. Parents' expectations are really high. And we tend to relax as we move our way through the family. And so by the time you get down to the youngest one, the parenting changes, and also you realise as a youngest one that you can't outrun, that you can't sort of smart your older sibling, but you can certainly outlast them. So they can be charmers, be a little bit more manipulative, and they're more likely to do things their own way. So perhaps, let's say, if it's an academic family, the firstborn, I'd put money on it, the firstborn being the academic, like mum or dad. By the time you get to the youngest one, they're less likely to follow what I call the family standard, and they're more likely to do things quite differently and challenge conventionality and challenge the way that parents do things.
Okay, well,
so in some ways they're a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more likely to actually do things that just the way they want them to be.
Some good insights and some good advice for parents too. Michael, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Said us middle children of balance got a chip on both shoulders.